What if fixing a deep scratch in just 1 hour could put $400 in your pocket right in someone's driveway? Well, since 2012, my business has repaired thousands of scratches just like this and generated millions in revenue. So in this video, I'm going to show you my exact touch-up scratch repair process step by step so you can see how easy it is to start building your own six-figure mobile auto body repair and paint business, even if you're totally new at this. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is kind of assess the damage here. So you can see, well, I don't know if you can actually pick it up in the video, but there's a lighter scratch that's only in the clear coat, and then it goes to a very deep scratch that's actually all the way down to the metal, and it goes back to a lighter scratch. Now, one way you can test this to determine if a scratch can be removed is to use some thinner. So I'm going to put some thinner on a paper towel and I'm going to wipe across the scratch. And you can see in the video when I wipe the thinner across this lighter scratch, it completely disappears. What's happening is the thinner's filling the scratch and so light can't reflect back out. So this tells me that this scratch here can be removed with buffing and or wet sanding and buffing. But this particular scratch, if you'll notice, I can rub on that all day long. It's not coming out because it's all the way through to the metal, so we're going to need to touch this up. So what we're going to do first is, just like with any repair where we're going to be using paint, is we're always going to look up the paint code to make sure that we actually have all the toners on board. Once we've determined that we have all the toners on board, we're just going to clean this. I've already got my thinner out. You can clean it with thinner inside the scratch, or you can clean it with wax and grease remover. Since I've got thinner, it's already cleaned out. And so next we're going to move on to lightly sanding this area with some 1000 grit sandpaper. All right, so I've got my 1000 grit sandpaper. I'm just going to put it on a sanding block here, wrap it around. And the reason that we're sanding is because, well, for one thing, if you look at the technical data sheet of the base coat, it requires it, right, to increase adhesion. And another thing is that sometimes when you have chips and scratches, there'll be jagged edges. I just want to knock those down ever so slightly so they're not sticking out. So I'm just going to go ahead, take my 1000 grit, and I'm not going to sand a large area here. I'm literally just trying to get this sandpaper right in and around the immediate damaged area. So I'm just going to use the very corner of my block here and the sandpaper to just give it a very light sand. That's it. Hey, I just wanted to interrupt this video for a quick second. If you're watching me complete this repair and make hundreds of dollars in just a couple hours, and you're thinking, man, I wish I could do that, then this is for you. I created a complete training program called the Mobile Auto Body Accelerator that shows you exactly how to learn these repair skills, how to get customers, and how to build a six-figure mobile paint business from scratch. There really is nothing else like it. Just scan the QR code on the screen if you're watching on TV, or you can click the link down in the description below. And now let's get back to the video. And the next thing that we're going to want to do, I've already got my thinner out. You could use wax and grease remover, but I'm just going to clean that sanding dust off of there. And now we're ready to start layering in our paint. All right, before we start layering in our paint, I just want to talk a little bit about the paint and what I did to it. So I actually use a waterborne paint, which does behave differently than solvent-based paint. If you watch these guys on Instagram doing these touch-up scratch repair videos, if you notice, they're always doing it on a black car. And the reason is because it blends in really, really well on a black car. You can't see it, especially on video. Now, we don't have a black car here. We have a gray car. But the difference is between solvent and waterborne is that solvent paint tends to cure very, very hard. Waterborne paint never really gets super, super hard when it's fully cured. So they actually make a waterborne hardener that you can add to the paint. And that's what I've done. I've only mixed up about 7.5 grams of paint. There's 30 grams in an ounce just for reference. So it's a very small amount of paint. And I've added 5% by weight of waterborne hardener to the paint. And what this is going to do, it's going to help it behave more like solvent-based paint. So it's going to be more robust. It's going to cure a little bit harder. And so you'll see why that's important when we get to the very end, because we're actually going to wet sand the excess paint off to get it relatively smooth. All right, so now it's time to start putting in our paint. Let me go over the process really quick up front so that we kind of get a forest for the trees overview here of what's going on. So we're going to put in a very thin layer of paint. We're going to flash it with our heat gun, layer, flash, until, like I said, we build it up slightly above, and then we can wet sand and remove the excess. So there's two different ways to actually apply the paint into the chip or the scratch, and I'll just show you guys both. I use these little micro applicators. This is one way that you can do it. Another way is a spreader. So I'm just going to go ahead and show putting it in this way. So I'm just going to load up my micro applicator and kind of dab it on the inside here. And I'm going to touch it to the inside of the scratch, and I'm going to then pull the paint very carefully, keeping it inside of the scratch. You're basically using the principle of tension to kind of pull the paint along. So I've got the paint inside my scratch, and I'm going to go ahead and take my heat gun, and I'm just going to apply some gentle, even heat until the waterborne paint turns to a matte or satin-like finish. All right, and we're there. So that's one way that you can apply paint using a micro applicator. Let me go ahead. I'm going to actually thinner this out, and I'm going to show you guys using the spreader method. So you can also take your micro applicator, load it up with paint, and you're just going to dab the paint, a little bit of paint right here, and then you're just going to use your spreader, and you're going to spread it across the scratch. Now you can take a paper towel, slightly dampened, with some distilled water to remove the excess paint around the scratch. And then we're going to use our heat gun, again, to help flash it off. All right, and we're flashed. So it typically takes about 10 seconds or so to flash the paint off. Now, which method you choose to do is up to you. I mean, if you have a really, really calm hand and you can get it inside of the chip or the scratch, I do like to use the micro applicator method just because it prevents a lot of excess paint around the scratch. Now, one thing that you can also do, which I'll show you really quick, let me just thinner this off, is you can use some tape and you can mask off the chip or the scratch itself so that you don't get excess paint on the surrounding OEM finish. So we just take a piece of tape and get as close as we can to the edge of the scratch. Another piece, same thing right above the scratch. And now we can do the same thing. We can use our micro applicator or we can use our spreader. So I can just put some paint there at the start of the scratch, use my spreader, and spread it right over the scratch. And then once we've got it spread, we can use our heat gun and flash it off. Now, because when you use tape, the film thickness of the paint is a little bit thicker, so it takes a little bit longer than 10 seconds to actually flash it off. So it's pretty warm. So we can let this cool down for a minute, and then we'll just keep layering this in until we get the paint built up in this scratch. All right, so it's flashed off. I'm going to take my applicator again. We'll put it down at this end this time, and we'll drag in the opposite direction. And again, we'll flash it off with our heat gun, and we're just going to keep repeating this process until we get it filled. I'm not exactly sure how many layers that's going to be, but we're just going to keep going until we look at it by the eye and it looks like it's completely filled. All right, this is looking pretty good. The paint's sinking down into the scratch just a little bit. I'm going to do one more layer, I think. I'm going to flash it off. And then what you want to do with waterborne paint, once you get done flashing it off, you just want to let it cure for about 15 minutes. Just walk away, go do something productive, and then we'll be ready to come back and actually start removing our excess paint, readying it for clear coat. All right, now that I've flashed off the paint, I'm going to walk away for about 15 minutes and then I'm going to come back and we'll start wet sanding. All right, I let this cure for 2 to 3 minutes or so, and I went ahead and took the tape off, and I can see where the paint has shrunk down into the scratch a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit more paint inside of here with my micro applicator, and then again, we're going to flash it. We'll wait about 15 minutes. We're going to come back and we'll wet sand it. All right, I'm going to set my timer and we'll come back in 15 minutes. All right, my timer just went off for 15 minutes. It's been sitting and curing. And so now we're going to go ahead and use 1500 grit on our sanding block, and we're just going to wet sand this excess paint off smooth to prepare it to apply our clear coat. Now, when you're wet sanding, we're using 1500 grit. It's a fairly aggressive grit to be using for wet sanding. Typically, I'll start with 1500 if I'm trying to remove, let's say, a run or something, or a dust nib in clear coat. So we just want to wet sand this until we've removed the excess paint and no more. So I'm just going to wet sand it, wipe it dry, take a look, and as soon as I'm done, I want to stop because I don't want to remove too much of the OEM finish, because we still have to apply our clear coat, bake it, wet sand it again, and then buff it and polish it. And I don't want to remove too much material because I don't want to burn through. So I'm going to go ahead, wet my sandpaper, wet my paint here. I'm going to try to keep this as flat as possible. And I'm letting the sandpaper do the work. I'm not pressing very hard at all. And I'm just going in a lacrosse hatch pattern to remove this excess paint. All right, that looks pretty good. Go ahead and give it a quick wipe. Just flash off the water really quick. And all we're left with is our milky white original OEM clear coat surrounding this scratch. So now our paint is just below the surface of the surrounding OEM clear. I'm going to go ahead and mix up my clear coat, and I'm going to use a micro applicator, and I'm going to put clear coat inside of the scratch and a little bit surrounding the scratch, spreading it out with my applicator. And then we're going to bake this for 15 minutes. The clear coat that I use can be baked in 15 minutes. And once it cools, after about 1 or 2 minutes after that, it'll be ready to wet sand, and then we'll buff and polish and take a look and see what it looks like. All right, it's been 15 minutes and our paint has cured, and we've wet sanded and buffed off the excess paint. And so now I've mixed up my clear coat. I'm going to use my micro applicator, and I'm just going to get the clear coat inside of the painted scratch and spread it out ever so slightly around the surrounding area. And then I'm going to use my aerosol blender, dust it over top of it, grab our heat lamp, put it on there for 15 minutes, and then we'll be ready to wet sand and buff. So I'm just going to take a little bit of clear here, put it on my applicator. Again, using surface tension as our friend, touching it right to the scratch, dragging the clear coat inside the scratch, just ever so slightly, dragging it around our chip. I'm going to take my blender, dust our blender on there, and I'm going to go grab the heat lamp, put it on here, and we'll bake it for 15 minutes. All right, it's been 15 minutes, and I just took the heat lamp off, and I just let the panel cool for a minute or two. You just don't want it to be blazing hot when you go to start wet sanding and buffing on it. So I'm going to go ahead and just, again, let my sandpaper do the work and kind of go in a crosshatch pattern. And I'm just trying to achieve a milky white finish over that clear coat that I put on there, just knocking it down a little bit. So again, just crosshatch back and forth. And then I'll take a look and see what it looks like. All right, I just need to do just a hair bit more. I can still see some glossy areas of the clear that I've put on. Just a few more passes. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and we'll start buffing it. All right, so I've got my DA polisher. And remember, whenever we're going to buff or cut, we're going to use our buffing cutting pad and our cutting polish. And again, I like to put it on a 2 or 3 setting on the DA. This is a very small area, so I just need a couple of little small pea-sized drops of compound. Just kind of press it on there so we don't sling it all over the place. And we're just going to give a few passes, about 3 passes side to side and 3 passes up and down. All right, I'm going to wipe off the compound here. Let's see what it looks like. All right, it looks like I'm looking at it on the flop. I can't see any wet sand scratches in the clear coat. And now I'm going to go ahead and grab my polisher again, put my jeweling or polishing pad on it, grab my polish, and we're just going to give it a couple of quick swipes just to remove any hazing. All right, I've got my polishing pad on my polisher. I'm just going to put this on like a 1. It looks amazing. Granted, there's no sun, so I really don't know what this would look like in direct sunlight, if I could see any fine swirl marks. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit it with a little bit of polish real quick. Again, small area, so just a couple pea-sized drops. Same process. Give it a couple of quick passes. We'll wipe it off and we'll be done. All right, guys, we've got our polish wiped off. As you can see, I don't know if you can pick it up on video, but it's very difficult to see where the damage was. Now, you do have what's called scarring. It's kind of like when you get a cut and it heals, you're going to have a little bit of scar tissue there. That's what that is. But instead of a glaringly white scratch, now you have a scratch that's touched up with the exact color code of the vehicle. And it's also sealed with clear coat, so it's not going to be exposed to oxygen or to moisture. And so that is a permanent repair, really, that is a lot less expensive than having to sand and spray this entire panel. So that is a touch-up scratch repair. Now, if you want to see how I break down a real bumper job step by step and show you how a 2-hour driveway repair can turn into $600, you're going to want to watch this next video right here.